think I need to convince you any further that sleep is absolutely essential for health. I think we've seen lots of examples as to how it's something that we will frankly die without. However, having said that, I would like to try and provide a little bit of reassurance. We can alarm you, we need to alarm you, maybe that sleep is very important and that we need it. I would like to provide some reassurance to go alongside that actually sleep is a wonderful thing, and there are many things that we might be able to do to improve our sleep and subsequently to improve our health as well. So, to celebrate sleep, to celebrate World Sleep Day, we'd like you to be involved with the work that we're doing to find out about it. So, you will find in front of you, I hope, a sleep eye mask. So take it home, make use of it, it does make quite a difference. There's also a number of little cards. You will see a QR code in front of you. Feel free to scan it if you are happy to do so in your own time, and that's a way that you can get in touch with us. Let us have your contact details if you're comfortable to share them, and we will remain in contact and let you know about some of the projects that we're running to try to improve your sleep, to try to improve our sleep, because we're not blaming here. We are all subject to needing to sleep better, and I'm sure all of us could be better people and to function better and to feel healthier and happier if we do so. So Simon's provided a lot of information about how sleep is integral to our physical health. I'm going to focus a little bit more about how sleep affects how we feel about our sleep and how we feel in general as well. So what I would like you to do is to encourage you to be what's called sleep conscious. So we need to start reflecting on how our sleep patterns exist, how much we have allowed them to become a routine, even if they're really quite irregular, and if there's anything that we can do to try to upgrade them and improve them a little bit. Okay, so I think we've already made these points. We spend a lot of time sleeping, perhaps not quite enough, but surely sleep serves, if not a function, a number of absolutely essential functions. We've got to really make sure that we honour our sleep and ourselves by devoting sufficient time to it. And here's the quote that Simon mentioned earlier. I was going to talk about from Matt Walker, whose work you may have come across, Nottingham lad turned Californian, that wakefulness is low-level brain damage. So we may be feeling this already. It may be a long day and we're still demanding quite a lot of brain input from you. At this point, we may be feeling a little bit tired and a little bit like we're not functioning optimally. Actually, we're probably putting you in pretty poor conditions for learning. We're making you sit down, feel a little bit sleepy with low lighting. All of that is kind of confusing our brain a little bit, but it's getting nearer to that time where we should be thinking, I'm feeling sleepy, maybe I should be getting ready to have some sleep. We need to pay attention to those cues. When we just slob out with Netflix on in front of the TV and we feel like that, and we're too tired to even get up the stairs, we've kind of passed that point. We really need to drag ourselves up the stairs to make sure that we can have some decent uninterrupted sleep. Simon's shown you a hypnogram, the name of this figure that shows over time, over a perfect 8-hour night of sleep, how we can transition throughout these different sleep stages. According to World Sleep Societies, which govern and coordinate World Sleep Day, there's an emphasis that sleep doesn't need to just exist for a certain amount of time, 7 hours-ish, but it needs to be good quality sleep as well. So we need to experience all of these different stages of sleep. If you look at this hypnogram, you can see that nearer the beginning of the night we have more of our deep sleep. That's the stuff that makes you really swear and say bad things if someone tries to wake you up from it, because it is really, really deep and restorative. We feel better after we've had that, but that doesn't mean that we've had enough sleep after we've transitioned through those deep stages. We then need to have those slightly more brain alert, interesting rapid eye movement stages to help us to process our memories and work through our emotions and do other things too. If we don't sleep long enough to have those rapid eye movement phases, that's when we feel maybe physically okay, but actually we don't feel emotionally okay. And maybe we've all experienced that to different ends. I've put another kind of hypnogram up there as well. Does anyone recognise what kind of hypnogram that is or where that might be from? Anybody got a Fitbit or something similar? Okay, so that's taken from a Fitbit, and it's meant to be a similar kind of hypnogram, but what you might notice, or you might be familiar with if you've got one of these wearables, is that we don't call the sleep stages exactly the same thing as the sleep scientists do. They're referred to deep sleep, light sleep. They're not scientifically real things, so be a little bit cautious when you're trying to interpret your wearable sleep data. But they can still give you general information about how long you've slept for and how you've transitioned through these different stages in a gisty way. They're not 100% precise. And I say that not to alarm you, but just to allow you to be a little bit cautious. If you're looking at some kind of wearable or data from a wearable or some kind of information about how you're sleeping, it might not be 100% accurate. Okay, so the other elements of good quality sleep then are continuity. Now, that means that we don't want to have interruptions in an ideal world. Having said that, because we transition through these different sleep stages, it's actually quite normal to wake up a little bit later on in the night, or that usually translates to early hours of the mornings. And that's okay. Often we can fall back asleep again quite quickly. We might not even be aware that we've had those awakenings. But what I don't want you to do tonight is to go home and think, oh my goodness, my sleep's awful, that means I'm going to die. And then you wake up in the night and you think, oh, I should be asleep. That can make you feel a bit panicky, and it's not really conducive to the right conditions to feel relaxed and get back to sleep. So try to be kind to yourself. It's perfectly normal to have these awakenings. If you are having regular awakenings, struggling to get back to sleep, that's when we might need to take action a little bit differently. Okay. How well do you sleep? Who feels like they could wake up this morning, or did wake up this morning, and leapt out of bed feeling completely 100% restored, full of life? One. We salute you, and I'm very pleased.
That is only because despite being awake, I just lie there for a bit. It's like
Enjoy. I'm very glad, but I'm less glad that that's only one person. And it seems a bit of a dream. It seems a bit like a wishful idea, doesn't it? To spring out of bed feeling absolutely wonderful. How many people used an alarm to wake up this morning? Whoa! Wow. Okay. We have to use them, but then they're alarming. They're not very pleasant to wake up to, are they? So, one way that we can try and work out how long we've slept for and consequently how good quality our sleep is just by asking you how you feel. I could also say, do you feel rested? Do you feel like you're resilient? Do you feel ready for the day? And when I did ask that, I heard a little bit of a so maybe not enough of us are feeling wonderful as if we've had enough sleep. So instead I could say, how much sleep do you think you had? And I could do that, and I will do that. However, we need to be a little bit cautious in the way that we interpret our own estimations. Okay? So this is quite a common psychological effect. It's been done in lots of pool players and basketball players and all sorts. Generally, people who are above average in something tend to overestimate how good they are at it, and people who are pretty poor at something tend to underestimate. Generally, the same is true when people estimate their quality of sleep. So generally, if people sleep okay, they overestimate how long they've slept for, and say, it didn't take them very long to get to sleep at all. And likewise, some people who feel like maybe they didn't sleep so well say, I've got insomnia and it's absolutely awful and I was awake all night. And actually, if you pop them in a sleep lab or measure their sleep, they're probably getting more than they think they are. So clearly there's a bit of a mismatch sometimes, and that can make it quite hard to try to provide accurate feedback to people in terms of behavioural recommendations to make them feel better. There's also an interesting thing where people who are sleep deprived are just rubbish at lots of things, one of which being estimating how much sleep they've had. So we've got to be really quite cautious and instead think about ways that we can assess our own sleep health by really dedicating some time and effort to that. So how do you know if you've slept enough? Top right here you can see a number of different sort of increasingly subjective measurements that maybe researchers use and maybe you yourselves may use when you're estimating your own sleep. The PSQI stands for Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. That's a really well-used sleep measure that just asks you how many times did you wake up last night? Did you wake up because you were snoring? Did you wake up for other reasons? And there's a chance for you to fill that in and think about your own sleep health if you would like to by clicking on that QR code. There's some other interesting ways that we know if we've slept enough. actually our brain has this fantastic inner clock that generally knows how much time has passed, even when you may feel like you've been completely zonked out and dead to the world. One thing that always surprises me is when people say they were unconscious when they were asleep. You're not, you're very much conscious and you're very much alive. And we know that because we generally have an idea as to how much time has passed. Also, if I wake you up and said what was going through your mind when you were sleeping, you could usually tell me something. So there are other ways that we know if we've slept enough, or more pertinently, if we haven't slept enough. Because we might feel tired, that sounds very obvious. We might feel, conversely, quite ready for the day, we might feel resilient. If I ask Lincolnshire audiences, I often get that they feel mardy, which isn't a French Tuesday, it's they feel grumpy, it's fed up with the world. And I think we can probably, if we're honest, all relate to that as well. So if we want to be sleep conscious, we need to just spend a little bit of time thinking about our own routines and not just assuming that if we have a regular routine, that it's okay. And I have my dad in mind when I mention that, and I say, I'm doing a talk because, you know, the clocks have changed. What do you want to do that? Well, actually, with losing an hour of sleep, it's quite important, and the effects are quite profound. You know, Simon mentioned about cardiovascular hospital admissions increasing by about 25% after the spring clock shift forward, for example. But Dad's all right, so he said, no, I'm absolutely fine, thank you, I'm okay. Now, this is great that he's got a good regular sleep routine, but I don't think he's really engaging in a sleep-conscious way with insight in the best possible way, to be honest. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. Sorry, Dad. Okay, so let's think a little bit about consciousness of sleep in a different way. Let's think about what happens to our brain consciousness when we're actually asleep. Okay, alarms. They've woken you up, they've dragged you from your slumber into the real world. If you're using your alarm, you probably need to be up for a reason. Okay, so you quickly got to cast aside this beautiful world of sleep. Sometimes it feels like it's physically hard, and if you feel like it's really physically hard, you haven't slept enough. That seems very obvious to say. But if you are ever sort of paralysed, then you might have been abruptly brought out of a rapid eye movement sleep phase, and you do need a little bit more time. So you indicated you felt good when you woke up this morning, and also you indicated that you spent some time in bed, just enjoying. That's fantastic. Give your body time to adapt to this change when it's been dragged very abruptly from one physiological state to another. And the alarms can really, well, I'm trying to avoid the term be alarming, which is exactly what they're designed to do, but they can be really quite unpleasant. If you feel so tired that you hit the snooze button, anyone hit a snooze button? I think the giggles mean yes, but I'm not going to admit that I do. It's really bad for you, and I say that not to cause concern, but really to encourage you to think if there's an alternative way that you might be able to sleep a bit better. I don't know who decided that snoozing should last 9 minutes. The snooze buttons tend to give you 9 minutes. That's not long enough to let you get into a deep state of sleep. So if you're still tired and you want to get more sleep, you're not going to get enough. You're just going to start feeling sleepy and having some decent sleep, and then 9 minutes have passed and you're suddenly being alarmed into wakefulness again. So if you need to sleep more and you have the facility to do so, give yourself another half an hour. Okay, give yourself a little bit more time. That's going to be much more beneficial. If you don't have that luxury, I'm sorry, get out of bed. That's going to be better for you than kind of transitioning into this tired state back to wakeful state, because it's just going to make you feel rubbish. Here's another interesting hypnopompic state. Hypnopompia describes the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Very occasionally, it happens whereby actually we're really quite alert. We're in a particularly cortical alert period of rapid eye movement sleep. So much so that actually you're physically asleep, but your brain is really waking up. And that doesn't normally happen. When we're normally asleep and in rapid eye movement sleep, we don't know that we're asleep. We kind of accept the things that are happening, the thoughts that are playing out in our mind brains, we accept as if they are real. But occasionally we have these periods of what's called lucidity, and that's when we know that we're asleep and we know that we're dreaming. Very, very occasionally, a small proportion of those experiences allow the sleeper to exhibit some control over what's happening. Doesn't happen very often, But there's a lovely idea that, hey, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just control our dream content and go flying or visit somewhere new or eat a fantastic meal or hang out with these people that we think are really wonderful. The downside of that is that to allow your brain to get into that state where you can choose voluntarily what's happening, you're not asleep. And I'm sorry to break that to you, it's far better to just allow your brain to sort of play out these images in a way that you're less controlled of, and to let your body rest at the same time. Okay, so I'm talking about dreams. What are dreams? What happens inside our brains while we are asleep? Simon mentioned that dreams don't occur just during rapid eye movement sleep, although it's a very common misconception that occurs. That's not the case. We have managed to elicit dream reports from people in all stages of sleep with a really similar response rate, around 71-72% when we've woken people up across the night. And we don't say what were you dreaming, we say what was going through your mind when you were asleep. And we get lots of interesting kind of things, as you can imagine, from your own awareness of your dream content. But very typically we have this kind of thing, okay? So we have this kind of scenario where in the dream we might be ourselves, as we are now, current age, current haircut, whatever it might be. But we're in somewhere that we knew a long time ago. It might be where we went to school, or it might be the house that we grew up in. Often the location comes from a long time ago, whereas the activities that we're doing are current, and ourselves are current as well. And the person that we're with isn't someone we've ever actually met, though they are familiar to us, and they came from the Netflix documentary or whatever it was that we were watching the previous night. So what we have is this fragmentation of different memories that we are familiar with. We can make sense of them all individually, but they have been fragmented and then they've been recombined, and that recombination gives the dreams this bizarre, interesting quality. If we break them down, we can make sense of most of what we're dreaming about. Not always, and I suspect if I asked you, you might be able to generate some interesting and creative and surprising dream experiences. That certainly happens too. They're also the most memorable ones, as are emotional ones, which gives a bit of a disproportionate flavour as to what dreams are really like. But the vast majority are like this. And we know that that means these dream sources come from our memories. So again, when we're asleep, our brains are experiencing, reliving things that we're familiar with, but not in the same way that we did when we were awake, when it happened originally. And we think that's really useful. Okay, so we might be able to break down dreams into these individual fragments and make sense of them in that way, but there's also some kind of holistic themes that are really quite common. I'm sorry there's a lot on this slide. I hope you'll be able to pick out a few things. This is taken from Calvin Yu's work. He listed 100 most common dream themes, and I've picked out a few. The most common are characterised by emotion, and that's usually fear. Being chased, there's something threatening, there's monsters, or there's something being locked up. Have you had that experience where when you're asleep you're trying to run away from something but you can't run, or you're trying to get the key in the door but it won't go? You're trying, and sometimes that rehearsal, that pressure to try something out is so frustrating it wakes you up. And again, that means that it's really very much. We've got some other interesting things, flying into a rage, waking from sleep or seeing yourself sleeping. Lots of interesting common experiences, and we can probably recognise that we've had some of those ourselves. Okay, so why? What's happening in terms of this crazy consciousness? And I don't say the word crazy lightly, maybe I should as a psychologist, but we are quite literally insane when we're experiencing these visual hallucinations. They're not really happening, but we believe them. They're coming from somewhere we can't really control them. And in the vast majority of cases, we forget them. We are absolutely amnesic for all of those experiences. So we do go a little bit loopy when we are asleep. But if we don't have that ability to experience that loopiness, then conversely, that increases our chance of feeling really emotionally distressed in our waking lives. Okay, so we really need this opportunity to experience emotions. Okay, here's a very crudely oversimplified view of what might be going on. So we have, when we are awake, this view that nobody likes us. But we go to sleep and we experience that emotion again. We're probably not going to experience it in exactly the same way that we originally did when we were awake, but we experience the emotion, we get the flavour, we get that fragmentation, and we get the flavour. And then, hey, we wake up and we feel much more like we can cope with that emotion, like we've processed it and we're ready to face the day. Okay. There's a lot of text showing you a lot of text because one of the conditions of our event being signed up to being a World Sleep Day event was that we had to show that sleep is essential for health, and here are all the ways it's essential for health. Fortunately, Simon has covered all of that in wonderful detail, and what I wanted to pick out is this last line, that sleep is essential, not just to physical health, but to mental and emotional health as well. Okay, in what way? So I've given some examples as to, on a short-term scale, we might not feel so great, but what happens if our sleep is disturbed over a longer period of time? Well, we can see that poor sleep, in various different forms, is a feature of almost any mental disorder in its diagnostic terms that you can think of. Depression, Simon's already mentioned. Anxiety, that's such an intricate relationship with sleep, okay? And in a sort of cyclical way, okay? So if you are experiencing anxiety, you're worried. It might be that you're worried about some specific thing, or it might be that you are a worried person who's worried about many things. Either way, if you're worrying before you go to sleep, once again, you're not creating that lovely, relaxed condition that's going to allow your brain to relax and your body to relax, and for you to feel safe so you can close your eyes and get to sleep. If I were to ask you right now, just go to sleep, okay? I suspect you might not feel too comfortable doing so. Right? If I even said, just close your eyes, you probably might not feel too comfortable doing so. And okay, we're in a situation where we wouldn't ordinarily go to sleep. But if we transition that feeling and apply it to how we feel when we're going to sleep at night in our beds, if we feel anything similar, like, I don't really want to allow myself to shut down right now because I don't feel safe enough to stop, then there's some carryover of anxiety, and clearly that's going to interfere with our sleep. Once our sleep has been interfered with, we feel a bit rubbish, we have trouble coping with daily life, that's going to make us feel further rubbish and then increase our chance of anxiety, which is going to mean it's harder to switch off when we get less sleep. It's really easy to get into that cycle. So that relationship between poor sleep and anxiety is a really, really intricate one. Okay. There are a number of other mental disorders that we could discuss in the same kind of way. One of my favourite studies around sleep and emotional reactivity showed that in people who are sleep deprived, they started interpreting neutral stimuli as if it was negative, as if it was threatening and out to get them. Okay, take this evil water bottle that's clearly out to get them. Okay, so if we're feeling like we haven't slept enough, that's going to impact on the way that we perceive our interactions, other people, that car that's holding us up in front of us on the way into work, whatever it might be. It's their fault, they're out to get me. It's just not a good and healthy way to process our environment. Okay, so what can we do about it? This is the important thing, okay? We can identify some people who will be more likely to respond to sleep improvement treatments than others. And that's the case with all sorts of things. There are people who respond well, or respond to morphine. There are some people who don't show any responsivity to it at all. So that's the case with a number of different kinds of treatments. The same is true of psychological or behavioural ones. So we can think about people who have diagnosable sleep disorders, and they tend to be treated and should be treated via an appropriate medical route. I've talked about this relationship with anxiety. There are people who are anxious about everything, including their sleep, but actually their behaviours and the required treatment perhaps needs to be focused around their anxieties rather than their sleep, and then hopefully their sleep will follow. But I'm going to focus on the rest of us. Not the people who have insomnia, not the people who have diagnosable sleep disorders, but us, everybody. And in particular, our work has focused on different groups, and I'm going to talk you through them very briefly, if that's okay. I'm aware we're already a little bit over time as we started late, so I'll try and be as quick as I can be. So many of us have poor sleep habits, many of us can benefit from them, and that's where our work and the Sleep Well programme is focused. So we've started by looking at university students. There may well be some of you in the room, and I hope you can recognise some of the things that we're talking about. Our wonderful, attentive students who are rather, not everyone, rather attracted to nightlife. Nightlife is a whole culture that's based on staying up late and doing things at a time that is very much at odds with other aspects of society and our culture. That's going to create social jet lag, it's going to create a mismatch. It's really quite tricky then to contribute to society or engage in your lectures and turn up at 9 AM and feel well rested if there's been a reason to stay up till late as well. That's nobody's fault. That's a whole culture that exists in that way. So there's loads and loads of reasons to think that university students may need to have a little bit more sleep support than other people. So that's where our work sort of started. It's lots of evidence that suggests that people who move away from home in particular and go to university experience signs of depression, anxiety. Here's some other typical university student characteristics as well. They've experienced a major life transition if they've moved away from the family home and relocated, living away from their support networks. That brings with it cultural changes, altered social support. For young students, 18 to 21, they're still experiencing brain development and an associated circadian shift that, through no fault of anyone's, means there is a natural tendency for these people, starting from teenage years, to want to stay in bed later and stay up later as well. That facilitates the nightlife. And we associate that sometimes with the grumpy teens who want to stay in bed. It's not their fault. That's a very natural circadian shift for a large number of people. Then there's some external factors, some of which Simon touched on earlier as well. So living in accommodation where maybe there's a poor mattress quality, or there's thin walls and it's very noisy, or there's no blackout blinds, just thin curtains, so there's loads of light coming through. All sorts of very good reasons for sleep health to be impacted. Okay, so it's going to lead to sleep problems. So what can we do? Okay, one thing that we can do is we can tell people that sleep's really important, which is exactly what we're trying to do, and encourage people to engage in what's commonly known as sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is a term. Feels a little bit strange. It's very clinical, and it comes from this idea that sleep health should be clinical and squeaky clean, and if we have nice clean environments, then everything's going to be wonderful. Probably it's better to think of it as healthy sleep behaviours. Nevertheless, that's the term that's still used in a number of avenues. Here are some of the common tips that are evidence-based and commonly used and applied in order to sleep better. In students, some of these behavioural recommendations lead to improved sleep. They do. But it's not always as clear as that. It's not always easy. And that's because if we change a little bit of our sleep routine, that's going to impact on a number of other aspects of our routines, some of which are in our control, some are not. When it works really well, we sleep well, that impacts on our, our hunger cycles. We want to eat the right amount at the right times. We feel better rested, so we're going to get up early. We're going to get a good dose of sunlight. We're going to tell our brain that it's time to wake up. We are sufficiently rested that we want to exercise, and we start on this healthy cycle. That's when it works really, really well. But sleep fits into that routine amongst all of these other things, like when we eat and when we exercise, or when we drink alcohol, or when we're getting our phone line. So sleep can help reset that clock, but it's quite hard when you're only working on sleep and not thinking about all of these other factors that are impacted to make a huge change. And so the CBTI-based interventions that are normally more bespoke, they take quite a lot of time commitment, they involve one-on-one intervention. They're generally much more effective at improving sleep, but they're costly. And they are dedicated to those who feel that they have insomnia. So the rest of us need to work out how we can use these tips in a way that is really useful. Okay? So that's our challenge, and that's where the Sleep Well program comes in. We've been talking to people to try and find out about their sleep, because there's no point in us coming up with an intervention and saying, you do this, if we don't understand the needs of the people that we're wanting to work with. So we've been talking to people and having some wonderful conversations, and these are some of the themes that have been coming out so far. So these are conversations that we've had in groups and individually with university students. They've talked about a difficulty switching off. And that's something that we can probably all relate to, but in the academic world, we don't really know what that means. We assume that means there's cognitive aspects, so when we're just busy, because we've been working, responding to those emails late at night, or we've been really engaged in some kind of docudrama that we've been watching, then it's going to keep us cognitively alert. Okay, so there's that need to sort of keep the brain spinning, and then we need a bit more time before we can actually start to switch off. Then there's emotional aspects of being switched on that I've talked about in relation to anxiety already. If you are a parent with young children, it can be really hard to switch off in case you think, well, I might need to be there, my baby might wake up, or I might need to be there because someone might need me for whatever reason. So there's emotional aspects, there's cognitive aspects, and there's physical aspects too. People talked about caffeine and alcohol use. People talked about phone use a lot, and it was quite interesting talking to international students who were saying, don't tell me to take my phone away. It preempted the recommendations. Don't tell me to take my phone away, because that's my link to my family overseas. And so in those cases, it would seem too stressful and counterintuitive to make a recommendation to leave your phone away if just having it there made them feel like there was a connection. Okay? So again, this is where we need to adapt our understanding of behavioural improvements to the people in a personalised way. Okay. I'm not going to take you through all of this, don't worry, but this is just to show you that there's some health behaviour change theory that's guiding the ideas we have around our sleep improvement programme. And that's based on two main concepts. One is from a theory called self-determination theory, which is that if you're motivated, there's different components of motivation, but if you're motivated to do something, then you're going to do it. That sounds obvious, but if we want people to pledge to improve their sleep, we need to increase that motivation, and there are ways that we can do that by encouraging a bit of community and relatedness, making sure people feel competent and able to make some changes, and that they have the ability to make the changes, that it's within their control. The other aspect is from the theory of planned behaviour, which is around something called individual differences in intentions. That means that we all have a different level of intention to make a change. But again, like the theory of like the self-determination theory, if we can increase people's intention to make a change, ask people to commit, make a pledge, tell someone that you're going to improve your sleep, and then get them to ask you if you've actually done it, then that all helps to improve compliance. Okay. Our Sleep Well programme, we're rolling out at the moment, and we'll have a number of phases of it. So if you would like to take part, you are very, very welcome. There's some other cards that are out, most of them at the front. Feel free to pick one up if you like, and drop me an email. I would also like to mention, and hopefully not embarrass, John Whitehead, who sat at the back, who's a big part of this Sleep Well programme, as are a number of other colleagues in the room. So feel free to get in touch if you'd like to take part in it. It involves, sounds really simple, but you need to commit to it, aiming to sleep for 8 hours a night. Simon said that most of us get 7. Let's aim for 8. Let's aim high and see what we can get to. We need to do that in a routine fashion, because inconsistency of routine confuses the brain and confuses the body. It confuses every single cell in our body, such that then the brain and the body don't know when naturally to feel tired and to switch off. It's a bit like starving yourself and then eating a really big meal. Your body doesn't know when that next meal is going to come. So if you're feeling a bit tired, it's going to stock up and have a bit extra. If things are nice and predictable, your body gets into a habit where it says, I know I can eat now, I can do some stuff in a productive way, and then I'll feel tired a bit later, and it'll be a good chance to switch off and go to sleep. Predictability forms habits and helps habits be maintained. Then if you have a bad night for whatever reason, an early flight to catch, or you know have a night out, or whatever it might be, if it's a one-off, you can bounce back much more easily than if your routine is inconsistent and not habitual. The other aspect of the programme is that we ask you to choose something that feels right for you to make a change. So we're not saying, here's a load of sleep hygiene advice. We give you a small list, and we work with you and talk to you to find out which ones of these might work best for you. Okay. So we've run one of these studies already. We asked people to report on their sleep, a couple of weeks later to report again, and 2 weeks after to report again. After their first reports, we gave them some information about sleep and encouraged them to take part in the programme. Okay, we had around 43 people who got through the full 4 weeks of the study. Subjectively, half of our people said that they slept better. Simple as that. They said that they slept better. That's a objective report, but it was coupled with a number of responses like, no, I feel energetic in the morning after sleeping better. I'm in a better mood overall. I have headaches less often. I've created habits to sleep better, and it's working. So people were offering this guidance. What we want to do is expand on that with your help if you'd be willing to, and ensure that we add on some more measures to make sure that sleep's measured a little bit more objectively as well. I'm rushing through at this point because I'm aware of the time, please forgive me, but this is some of our other data from the study which showed that the number of hours that people slept increased. That's statistically significant. It equated to around 20 minutes per night that they increased. It doesn't sound a huge amount, but actually that's enough to make a substantial difference to be beneficial in terms of health. And people reported increases in their sleep behaviours, their sleep hygiene behaviours, etc. Okay. The last thing that I'm going to mention, and I promise I'll be as brief as I can, is that we're particularly interested in trying to work with people living with diabetes. And the reason there is that there's a huge evidence base that people who have diabetes have particularly poor sleep, and the worse their sleep, the worse their diabetic outcomes, and the greater their diabetic complications. So in that group, it's an example of one of many that we could work with. We're starting here. What we don't want to do is say, you need to sleep better. What we want to do is work with them, not purely to improve their sleep, but to improve their sleep in order to improve their diabetic outcomes. So we're not recruiting them because their sleep is poor. Their sleep happens to be poor, just like many people's sleep is poor. But we want to work with them in order to improve their diabetes. Just like with the sleep and anxiety cycle, there is a really predictable cycle as to the impact of sleep, poor sleep, sleep deprivation, sleep disturbance on glucose levels and the changeability of that and the lack of insulin responsivity and sensitivity. So we know that we need to work on sleep, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're doing the same thing with the Sleep Well study, and we're going to be adding in some additional measures of sleep and in order to monitor glucose as well. So if you or anyone you know is particularly interested in that, once again, please do get in touch. Okay, we've talked a lot. We've possibly alarmed you. I hope we've offered a little bit of reassurance as well. I'm truly convinced that this should be an easy sell. This should be an easy job for us because sleep's bloody wonderful, right? It's not like I'm telling you to go out and run 10K every single day. I'm not forcing broccoli down your throat, although that's not that bad either. I'm asking you to stay in bed. That's really nice and that's really easy to do. It's nice in bed. Go early. Don't stay in the morning. Go early. Give yourself time to enjoy it. That sounds a little bit odd. I don't mean it to sound odd. But what I want you to do is give yourself time to get to bed and to relax. If you're getting to bed when you're already absolutely exhausted, or you're still quite wired and you're not granting yourself that time to wind down, then your sleep quality is going to be impacted. You probably then feel a bit pressured because time is scarce and you've got to get to sleep, you've got to get to sleep. That's not going to let you sleep well. So please, we want you to sleep well. We're confident that that will improve your health, and we'll try and do whatever we can to help you with it. Monitor your tired cycles. Okay, we all have these rhythms that transition through the night when we're asleep. They transition, or we transition through them in the day as well. We have active periods followed by slightly less active periods. Monitor when they are. I know when my less active periods are because they used to align with when I would put my kids to bed and I would read them a story and be snoring. Now they stay for a little bit later, and that means I'm in a better routine too. You will probably be able to monitor when your tired periods are. You'll be yawning, you'll be feeling sluggish, you won't want to move. Just see how regular they are. Predict when your next one's going to be. Get your pyjamas on, clean your teeth, go up to bed 20 minutes before that, and it should help. Okay. Thank you so much for your attention. We're very happy to answer any questions if you have any. Please take the eye masks, enjoy a snack, got some peanuts left, and we very much hope that you sleep well. Thank you.